Before starting this script, you have to understand something that can completely change this Formula One season. Mercedes seemed to have found the dominant car in China, but now that performance is under a huge shadow of suspicion. After analyzing data from the Shanghai Grand Prix, the FIA has launched an additional investigation into the German team's engine after detecting anomalous patterns in the W17's energy deployment, something that has set off all the alarms within the paddock and could have enormous consequences for the championship. Now I ask you a direct question that defines this entire video. Are we simply seeing an engineering masterpiece by Mercedes, or are we facing a technical advantage that could be crossing the limits of the regulations? Because what the rival teams discovered after the Chinese GP is so strange that Ferrari and Red Bull decided to review telemetry, GPS data, and even the energy behavior of the car on the long straights of the circuit. And what they found put the W17 immediately in the FIA's sights. What looked like a dominant performance could turn out to be Mercedes' biggest technical problem in years. And if this investigation shows that there is something wrong with the car's engine or hybrid system, not only could they lose their current advantage, but even the result of the Chinese Grand Prix could be in jeopardy. So in this video we are going to analyze exactly what the FIA is investigating, why rivals believe that the Mercedes engine could be taking advantage of a loophole in the regulations, and above all what consequences this could have for the Brackley team and for the entire fight for the championship. Because what started as a simple suspicion in the paddock has now turned into an official investigation that could shake up the entire Formula One. Over the Chinese Grand Prix weekend, the general feeling was that Mercedes had made a huge leap in performance. Its drivers were competitive in practically all sectors of the circuit, but especially in the longest section of Shanghai, that endless straight where modern hybrid engines deploy their full potential. There, the W17 seemed to behave differently from the rest. While Ferrari, McLaren, or Red Bull began to lose part of their electric thrust at the end of the straight, something completely normal due to the energy limits of the regulations, the Mercedes continued to push with surprisingly constant power for more meters. In simple terms, the German car seemed to have more power available just when it matters most. At first, many thought it was simply a brilliant development of the hybrid system. Mercedes has always been one of the most advanced teams in energy management within Formula One, and it would not be the first time they found a more efficient way to use the ERS system. But what began as technical admiration soon turned into suspicion. Engineers from various teams began to compare the available performance data of the Mercedes with that of their own cars. They analyzed the speed graphs, reviewed the behavior of the electrical deployment, and studied how the W17's acceleration varied along the main straight. And the more they analyzed the data, the stranger the Mercedes pattern seemed. The problem is that the Formula One regulations strictly limit how much electrical energy a car can deploy per lap and what the maximum power allowed by the hybrid system is. In theory, all teams should show relatively similar behavior when the time comes when the battery starts to run out during a long straight. This moment is known as derating, and it is when the electrical system stops providing its maximum power because the available energy has been consumed. But in the case of the Mercedes, that point seemed to come later than any other car on the grid. This means that the W17 maintained its hybrid power for longer, something that in terms of performance can translate into several tenths per lap, a gigantic difference in modern Formula One. It was at that moment that alarms began to ring within the paddock. Ferrari and Red Bull, two of Mercedes' direct rivals in the fight for the championship, decided to delve deeper into the analysis. Using comparative telemetry tools, GPS data, and even engine acoustic logs, they attempted to reconstruct exactly what was happening inside the W17 in the areas of maximum acceleration. The objective was simple: to discover if Mercedes had found a revolutionary technical solution, or if it was taking advantage of a loophole in the regulations. The preliminary conclusions of that analysis were worrying enough for the issue to come directly to the FIA. The data suggested that the Mercedes energy deployment pattern did not match the behavior expected under the limitations of the hybrid regulation. It wasn't a small difference nor something that could easily be explained by aerodynamics or car setup. It seemed to be something much deeper related to the way the engine and hybrid system managed energy during the lap. And that's when the situation took a much more serious turn. The FIA decided to open an additional specific investigation into the Mercedes power unit after the Chinese Grand Prix. These types of investigations are not simple routine technical controls. They involve a detailed analysis of software, engine maps, and operation of the hybrid system. In other words, the technical stewards want to understand exactly how the W17 engine is working and whether this extraordinary behavior on a straight line remains within the limits of the regulations or if, on the contrary, there is some type of technical irregularity. Suddenly, what seemed like a sporting success story for Mercedes has transformed into an extremely delicate situation. Because if the FIA confirms that everything is legal, the German team will have demonstrated once again that its capacity for innovation is still among the best in Formula One. But if they find something that violates the regulations, the consequences could be enormous. And the most disturbing thing for Mercedes is that this investigation is just beginning, meaning the true impact of this story could yet be revealed. That as the investigation began to take shape within the FIA technical offices, the atmosphere in the paddock began to change evidently. What had initially been a simple curiosity about the speed of the Mercedes on Shanghai's long straights was now turning into a much more serious technical suspicion. Engineers from various teams began to openly discuss 3 possible areas where the W17's advantage could be hidden. None of them have been officially confirmed, but they all point to the same place: the way Mercedes is managing the energy and power of its hybrid unit during acceleration phases. And if any of these theories turns out to be true, we would be talking about one of the most controversial technical developments in recent years in Formula One. The first theory circulating within the paddock is related to the heart of the modern hybrid system, the ERS. This system is responsible for recovering energy during braking and redistributing it later to increase the car's power during acceleration. The regulations establish very clear limits on how much electrical power can be delivered at any given time and how much energy can be used per lap. However, some rival engineers believe Mercedes may have found a way to redirect power through a secondary circuit within the hybrid system. This would allow small additional power spikes to be created during acceleration without the main system registering a direct violation of the electrical power limit. In other words, the car could be receiving an extra boost of energy at key times without that increase being immediately detected by standard sensors. If this theory were correct, it would perfectly explain why the W17 seemed to continue pushing so hard even when other cars began to lose their electric assistance at the end of the straight. The second hypothesis that is being analyzed has to do with something even more delicate: fuel flow. In current Formula One engines, there is an extremely strict limit on the amount of fuel that can enter the engine per second. To control this parameter, the FIA uses ultrasonic sensors that measure the flow of gasoline in real time throughout the race. These sensors are one of the most closely monitored elements of the regulation because any increase in fuel flow can directly translate into more power from the combustion engine. Some rumors suggest that Mercedes could be manipulating the ultrasonic frequency of the flow meter, slightly altering the sensor reading to allow more fuel than allowed to pass through without triggering the FIA control system alarms. It's a very difficult theory to prove and even more difficult to execute, but if there was a way to do it, it could explain why the Mercedes engine seems to have such impressive acceleration capabilities on the long straights of the Shanghai circuit. The third point under suspicion is perhaps the most sophisticated from a technical point of view: the thermal management of the hybrid battery. In Formula One cars, the battery that stores the energy recovered by the ERS system must operate within a very specific temperature window to operate at peak performance. If the battery becomes too hot, the system automatically reduces power to protect internal components. Some engineers believe that Mercedes could have developed an extremely efficient cooling system that keeps the battery at its ideal temperature for longer. This would allow the hybrid system to continue delivering maximum power for a longer period before entering the energy reduction phase known as derating. If this solution actually exists, it would not necessarily involve a direct violation of the regulations, but it could represent such a significant technological advantage that it would force the FIA to review the rules to prevent other teams from falling too far behind. What makes these 3 theories especially worrying for the FIA is that they all have something in common. They involve a complex combination of hardware, software, and energy management. This means that the investigation is not limited to simply disassembling the engine and checking its physical components. Stewards are now analyzing the engine maps, the algorithms that control power deployment, and all the data generated during the Chinese Grand Prix weekend. In other words, they are trying to digitally reconstruct how exactly the Mercedes hybrid system worked during each lap of the circuit. And that type of technical audit can reveal extremely precise details about the car's behavior. Meanwhile, inside the paddock, the atmosphere has become increasingly tense. Rival teams are watching the development of this investigation with enormous attention because they know that the result could change the balance of power in the championship. If Mercedes has found a completely legal but extremely innovative solution, the rest of the field will have to react quickly to try to replicate that advantage. But if the FIA determines that there is an illegal interpretation of the regulations, the German team could face sanctions that go far beyond a simple technical warning. And that is precisely what is keeping all of Formula One in suspense at the moment. Right now, the entire paddock is waiting for answers. Rival teams know that the result of this investigation could completely change the competitive balance of Formula One. If Mercedes has found a legal technical solution, we would be facing an innovation that could give them a huge advantage for much of the season, forcing Ferrari, McLaren, and Red Bull to react quickly so as not to be left behind. But if the FIA detects any irregularity in the operation of the engine or the hybrid system, the consequences could be devastating for the German team, not only in sporting terms, but also in the technical development of its car for the rest of the championship. Now I want to know your opinion. Do you think Mercedes has simply found a brilliant innovation within the regulations, or do you think the FIA will end up discovering something irregular with the W17 engine? Leave it to me in the comments, because this story is still far from over and what happens in the coming weeks could completely change the fight for the championship. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.